Up in Australia's remote north, the Gulf of Carpentaria is a vast, sparsely populated place. It's a region of extremes, from the baking dry in winter to the sticky heat and flooding monsoonal rains of the wet season. Some may see these wide open spaces as holding great possibility for development, but we need to ensure we don't put the Gulf's immense riches at risk. The Gulf region is a key link in the chain of natural landscapes across northern Australia, from the Kimberley to Cape York. It's home to some of Australia's most important rivers, wetlands and marine environments. This incredible biodiversity supports many local communities and threatened species. As we look to the north for more opportunities to expand agriculture and other industries, we need to foster development that is sustainable to achieve economic, environmental and social benefits for all. For the past 6 years, the Northern Australia Environmental Resources Hub of the Australian Government's National Environmental Science Program has been getting to know more about the values of this unique region and some of the threats to its future. Researching the Gulf is challenging work. We go to some of the most remote places in Australia, navigating wetlands, rivers, mudflats, salt pans and mangroves to gather important data that tells a story about the environmental health, sustainability and future economic potential of this diverse region. Our researchers have built on science partnerships and knowledge in the Gulf that go back 2 decades. We are also collaborating with traditional owners who have been connected to this land for tens of thousands of years.
A lot of people around Australia are looking north and seeing a lot of water, and there's an interest in developing the catchment for agriculture. So it's really important that we can understand how the river itself functions. If this development does go ahead, we can understand the implications of that.
We have a number of rivers that flow into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and they are mostly pretty pristine. There's not a lot of damming or other water extraction that occurs on those river systems. The landscape's really flat, so they're meandering rivers that flow for many hundreds of kilometres. That environment has some very unique animals and plants in it, and part of why that is because we have these dry seasons every year which last for about 8 or 9 months, and then we can have, depending on the year, these massive wet seasons. And so the whole system is adapted to this, surviving the dry season and taking advantage of the wet season. The Gulf rivers are really important for the local communities up there and for industry, particularly the fisheries. So there's 2 major fisheries. There's the barramundi fishery and the banana prawn fishery. Those rivers and estuaries are important to those 2 species for different reasons. For the banana prawn, they live there during their juvenile phase of growth, and that's a few months of the year. They come in as larvae, they live as juveniles, they fatten up, they grow, and then they move out into the fishery. The barramundi use the system in a different way. They need the rivers and the floodplains that flood every year as breeding and feeding areas. So they move up and down the river, so they need that connection in the river. They go out in the estuaries, they go out to sea, and they go out on the floodplains. So the flow is really important for these 2 species for different reasons. And if we start to allocate water that goes for irrigated agriculture and other requirements, we run the risk, if we're not careful, of taking too much water out of the system, and then the banana prawns and the barramundi fisheries will be affected, so they won't be able to catch as many animals.
Migratory shorebirds also rely on the health of the Gulf's river systems.
Wet season is positive. We'll know that food's going to be there for the next year. Bring soils and stuff like that down. They come here in September, it's the start of our spring, and they'll stay here all the way through the summer months. And then when winter comes here, they move back to Russia.
A number of birds are in such numbers that they're internationally and nationally significant for the flyway, particularly the black-tailed godwit. The black-tailed godwit has larger numbers there than anywhere else we know about in Australia, and indeed in much of the flyway. It's extraordinarily important for that particular bird, but also for a number of other birds, the eastern curlew, which is now critically endangered, greater and lesser sandplovers, whimbrel, and a number of other birds that flourish in that kind of environment where you get large mudflats and big estuaries.
One of the things that the project did was discovered how productive the mudflats and sandflats were in the southern Gulf.
The coastal waters of the Gulf are also an important habitat for 3 threatened species of sea turtle, the flatback, hawksbill and olive ridley.
Feral pigs cause the most damage to marine turtles on Cape York. That's a really clear story that's emerged from our research with Arcponunctum on the west coast of Cape York. We've found that feral pigs, without control, were predating on 100% of all of the baby turtles out there.
The physical damage caused by pigs was in fact a severe limiting factor to both the number, the abundance of invertebrates living around the wetland, how many there are, and also the diversity.
This work has contributed to how rangers now manage pig populations and the impacts of predation to nesting turtle populations. NESP Northern researchers have investigated some of the other threats affecting the Gulf coastline, including gamba grass, tilapia and marine debris. In 2015, an unprecedented mangrove dieback happened along more than 1,500 kilometres of the Gulf coastline.
The sea level dropped about 20 centimetres and it was coincidental with extreme heat and very, very low rainfall. So you can see that all the mangroves here died.
The research has identified the causes of the mangrove dieback and ways to predict it into the future. NESP Northern researchers have collaborated with Indigenous ranger groups in the Gulf of Carpentaria for monitoring and early detection of mangrove dieback conditions. Understanding these complex ecosystems better and working together are key to securing these valuable resources for future generations.
Feral pigs can also carry these diseases we don't want in the country. There's a biosecurity benefit too. If these diseases become established, they could then spill over into our domestic herd. These can have significant impacts on primary industries.
The Gulf of Carpentaria waterways sustain important ecosystems. They provide food and jobs, and the fishing, mining and agriculture industries depend on them. The Northern Australia Environmental Resources Hub's research will help those making decisions about this region's future aware of the trade-offs and help to ensure that development is done sustainably so the Gulf can remain a beautiful and productive part of Australia.